Welcome to the July 22nd meeting of the Plan Board, June 22nd meeting of the Plan Board. Call the meeting to order. Mr. Castillo, will you call the roll, please?
Robert Ackerman,
Here.
Nicholas Hill,
Here.
Joshua Nay,
Here.
Jason Sanchez,
Here.
Stephanie Sutton,
Here.
Tina Certain. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to accept the agenda, to adopt the agenda, please? We just have one item tonight.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. I think we have the minutes today. Okay. Pardon me? Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Can I have a motion to approve last month's minutes, which are for May, but not for the meeting we had 2 weeks ago? Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, we have an agenda. Is there anybody here who would like to speak on issues that are not on our agenda tonight? Seeing none, Mr. Castillo, would you read the first item, the only item into the record, please?
Sure. Item 2023-615, LD 23-35, Magnolia Park Plan Development Amendment. This is a request for an amendment to Magnolia Park's existing plan development to allow for an estimated 250 multifamily units.
Mr. Chan, I think you're on.
I was expecting a longer. Sorry. But I wrote that description, so I guess that makes sense that it's more short. Good evening, Chair Ackerman and members of the City Plan Board. My name is Nathaniel Chan. I'm a planner with the City of Gainesville, Department of Sustainable Development. This is LD 2335, a plan development amendment for Magnolia Park, which is located on 39th Avenue. So, Magnolia Park is a mixed-use development that allows commercial, office, and residential uses. It's located at 5016 Northwest 39th Ave and 5051 Northwest 41st Place. It's approximately 26 acres with planned development zoning and planned use district and mixed-use low future land use. The applicant is requesting an amendment to their PD standards, mainly pertaining to pods D and E, to facilitate residential development. So there is one standard that's not on here that I forgot to add, but they're changing part of their density allowance. So they're removing the maximum dwelling units per acre. Currently, that's 20 units per acre. And in the existing PD, they've outlined, or they've kept a maximum of 400 units for the whole property. And to date, 10 dwelling units have been developed. They're proposing 250 dwelling units. So it's under that 400 maximum, and the removal of the 20 units per acre should allow them to develop pods D and E. They're removing some residential square footage limits, removing max building footprint limits. There are a lot of strike-through underlines of the PD standards that I won't get into too much detail here, but these are sort of just the high points. Residential allowed as a first floor use. Minimum stories is reduced to 1, even though I believe they're proposing more than 1 story. Max stories increased to 4 within Pod E. And other design standards like setbacks, sidewalks, parking, signage have very, very slight changes in the PD standards. So here's an aerial view of Magnolia Park, and this is the boundaries of the PD of Magnolia Park. I've identified some of the notable developments here. Ichiban Sushi, Crafty Bastards, Starbucks, There's UF Health Rehab and Family Medicine, with some other developments. One Love Cafe is, I guess, one of the bigger ones here as well. And then I've identified some of the other developments around Magnolia Park in the lighter blue. So there's a Tires Plus in the corner of 51st and 39th. Lake Crossing Apartments, the Retreat at Magnolia Park, which isn't part of the PD, but that's north, and then Bellamy Forge condos. These are all, except for Tires Plus, multifamily development in the area. So here's the existing future land use categories surrounding Magnolia Park. Magnolia Park is mostly mixed-use low, future land use, with PD being sort of on the front in pods A, B, I, and G, I believe. And you can see their surrounding future land uses being a mix of multifamily, like medium high density residential. There's county future land use surrounding the property, and then there's some City of Gainesville future land use as well. And here's the existing zoning. Magnolia Park is all PD zoning with mixed use 1 or MU1 City of Gainesville to the north, some residential multifamily to the east, and then planned development, Alachua County planned development to the south and west. Here's the original PD layout plan. There isn't too much to note here other than they've identified some of the early pods, A and B, and they've sort of outlined some of the existing open areas and some of the wetland areas as well. Here's the revised PD layout plan. It is bothering me that like the text isn't within that box, but I'll just note that. The PD layout plan was revised in 2008 under another PD amendment where they allowed drive-throughs in, I believe, Pod A. And that is what's basically what's existing right now. So take note of pods D and E. So this here is sort of the area that will be modified with this proposed plan development amendment. So as you can see, there are some, most of the pods stay the same except for those with revisions to D, E, and parts of pod C. The building envelopes have changed slightly, connectivity has changed slightly, and there's a parking area in the center here, which is shown on their conceptual plan. The applicant is proposing these 4 main residential buildings with associated parking in the center and some shared parking with Pod C sort of surrounding One Love Cafe and these 2 pods. They can speak a little bit more to their vision and their proposal. So the proposed PD amendment meets the PD rezoning criteria as outlined in the Land Development Code. The comp plan, it's consistent with the comprehensive plan in providing sort of integrated communities with a mix of uses within close proximity with each other. It meets or has connectivity with the existing transportation system. It's connected to RTS Route 43. It is also compatible with surrounding uses, and the environmental constraints have been sort of detailed in the environmental report as well. That's the end of my presentation. Staff recommends approval of LD 2335. Staff did receive a letter of opposition yesterday, and I made copies, and they're available to you, and I believe it was sent an email as well. And that's the end of my presentation. I'm here to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. Any questions for Mr. Chan from staff? Seeing none, sorry.
I
Go ahead,
have
Miss-
one question, but it might be better for the applicant. And it has to do with sort of the building characteristics and sort of building form standards, which you all may go more into. But Some of the requirements for entrances, for glazing, for like building relief have seemingly won't apply to these residential buildings. And I just would like to see some kind of standards in there for the residential buildings and what the buildings are going to look like. So I don't know if you had that conversation with the applicant. I'm not seeing where that is here, but maybe I'm just not looking in the right place because this was a lot of backup.
Yeah, there is a lot of backup. I think the report is like 300 pages or something. I think that their presentation might speak a little bit more to that. So maybe hold on to that. I can back up if you still have that question
Okay,
afterwards.
but that's not a conversation that you had or comments that you like made on the application and got a response to or anything?
Not necessarily, no. We did see that some of the glazing requirements were removed and some of the building design standards were changed. So, but yeah, they're here to have that conversation now
Okay.
too.
And I think I'm generally okay with them being different for residential, but I do think we need a standard in the PD. So I think I'm okay with them being different for residential than for non-residential, but I do think we need a standard, whatever that might be. So we can talk more about that with the applicant, I guess.
Anybody else for Mr. Chan? Seeing none, we'll let the petitioner dazzle us.
I will do my best. Let's wait for the slide to come up. Okay, well, there it is. So good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is David Sowell. I'm an engineer for a company called Kimley Horn. I've been practicing engineering in this town for a little over 20 years. And because it's been a long time since I've been in front of the plan board, I want to make sure I submit my resume for the record. So I don't think we actually have a clerk, but if it's okay. Thank you. So as usual, staff does a great job presenting the bones of the project. And so I want to just use my time to present to you more context behind how we got here, why we want what we want, and how we plan on moving forward. So it really boils down to what you see on the screen, this nice rendering prepared by our architect, Scott Weber, and his company, ACI. We're really just asking for the ability to do traditional style, 4-story garden style multifamily apartments in the undeveloped portion of Magnolia Park, which, whoops, hold on, I apologize. There we go. So this is the rendering part of this, and so is some of this up here. All this in the background is existing, and up front is existing as well, just so everybody understands what you're seeing on the screen. This is just the teaser. I'll come back to this later, but I just wanted to show you kind of the intent behind this. So context of where this is, I think we all know where this is. It's been here for 26 years, but the closest intersection is right here, 43rd Street and 39th Avenue. Great proximity to employment centers, activity centers, all that stuff. So I think we know where this is, but just for the record. And Nate did a great job as well presenting, what's there. So I'm not going to dig down in the weeds of that. But essentially, this is an aerial that was less than a year ago. So this is the primary portion of the PD we're really asking for the major amendments to. There are some other amendments we're asking for in this area as well. But in general, this is really what I think people are interested in. So our timeline of how we got here, we had a first step meeting with city staff late October. We had our neighborhood workshop in mid-December. We submitted our rezoning application early March of this year, and a couple iterations of staff review, and then here we are today at the plan board. If things go well, we would like to be on the next available commission agenda. And for full disclosure, in the future, our intent is to submit full development plans for pods D and E and a portion of C as potentially as early as next year. So, but I'll get into that more in a second. So just to provide good, solid evidence of our workshop, we posted signs on November 22nd of last year. Letters were mailed the following day. We mailed them to all property owners within 400 feet and other interested parties as the list was supplied by the city. The meeting was held on December 12th, 2022 via Microsoft Teams, and a public participation report was provided to staff, and it includes a transcript of the meeting. Here's evidence of our posting. You can see the signs at key locations. And the results of the workshop, we had 6 residents attend the meeting. 2 residents spoke out with general concerns, and I actually expressed to them that those will be addressed during the development review process. And I told them that we would actually have, by city code, have to have another neighborhood workshop prior to submitting development plans. So just to put that out there. So this is the current PD. Nate did a great job explaining it as well, but pods D and E, right here, that's the subject, undeveloped pods. Pod F, that's the One Love pod. It's the Park pod, as we call it. Pod C is the pod with, it actually has 10 residential units on the 2nd floor and 3rd floor. And then pods G and C as well also have kind of medical, office, and kind of boutique retail as well. Pods A, B, and I is down here. That is highway-oriented sort of businesses, you know, restaurants, credit unions, Starbucks, you know, things like that. So this was approved in 1997. It's been revised several times. The most recently revision was the Pod A to add a drive-through to the PD. This was really, as far as I know, one of the first, if not the first, real T&D in the city of Gainesville. And I don't think we called them T&Ds back then. It was actually before I started practicing as an engineer. But you know, this was intended to be a live, work, play type of environment, and it's almost there. It's just missing one component. It got a little bit out of balance with its original intent. It permits up to 290,000 square feet of commercial. 20 dwelling units per acre with a cap up to 400 units. Essentially 134,000 square feet of commercial was built and 10 dwelling units have been built. So there's a lot of available capacity and quite an imbalance right now of residential versus commercial. So as I expressed, the unused capacity is there, 156,000 square feet of commercial, 390 dwelling units, quite a lot of capacity. So I said before, all pods have been developed except D&E. The PD was purchased in 2022. The developer saw some of this available capacity, saw the age of the PD, and thought this would be a great chance to update it to reflect current market demands, utilize that capacity, and balance the commercial to residential ratio. So I touched on it a little bit right there, but the reason for the PD amendment, we really just want to update and optimize this old 26-year-old PD to meet the infill goals of the comp plan and just the city overall. The details behind that, we want to utilize the approved development capacity. So keep in mind, approved development capacity. We're not asking for new capacity. This is what's already been approved. We're just trying to change the balance. We want to allow single-use residential structures. We want to add flexibility to the location and mixture of the uses. We want to increase the maximum allowed stories, remove the building limitations on size and floor area ratio, a little bit of an older planning metric that's not used as much, and other minor revisions and clarifications to the PD for things like architectural standards, signs, parking, sidewalks, landscape, buffers, and setbacks, all things that kind of bring it up to modern standards and offer some clarity. So this is the current standards. I'm going to get a little bit down in the weeds, maybe get a little monotonous, but right now, the meat and potatoes of this project is really pods D, E, C, and A, C, D, and E, however you want to say it. So pods D and E those are the ones that are undeveloped. Like I said, pods C and A are developed. Currently, this area right here is undeveloped as well. We are proposing to do something with that. That's in pod C. So to get it on the record, what's currently allowed, in pod A, the max floor area ratio is 0.2. The min and max stories are 1 and 2. There's no max building footprint. The allowed uses by floor are retail and office. Pod C, 1.3 FAR. The min and max stories are 2 and 4. The max building footprint is 5,000 square feet, and the allowed uses by floor are retail, office on the first and second floor, and residential on the second through fourth floors. For Pod D, the max FAR is 1.3. The min and max stories are 2/4. The max building footprint is 5,000 square feet. The allowed uses by floor are retail, office on the first and second, residential on the second and fourth. Pod E, 0.48 FAR, 2/3 for the min and max stories. The max building footprint, 5,000 square feet, and the retail and office are only allowed currently on the first floor, and the residential on the second and third floors. So thank you for listening to that. Again, I had to get it on the record. I will move to the proposed amendment. So this will be a little quicker. Right here, as alluded to by Nate, we are actually proposing to have a connection to 41st, which runs right here. You know what? Let me step back. I rotated the map on you, and I didn't tell you about it. North is to the right. I apologize. 39th Avenue is to the left. 51st is a page north. So I'm sure you could recognize that, but I try to be very clear, so I wasn't there. I apologize. So what we're proposing is for all the pods A, C, D, and E, we're proposing to remove the floor area requirement, the floor area ratio maximum. So we want to remove that completely for all pods. So specifically for Pod A, we want to increase the maximum stories from 2 to 3. We want to add residential as an allowed use through the whole pod. For Pod C, we want to remove that FAR. We also want to reduce the minimum height from 2 to 1 story. We want that option to go 1 story if possible. Remove the max building footprint requirement, and also essentially allow residential as a use throughout the entire building or entire pod, regardless of the story. And it's a very similar approach for pods D and E. We want to remove the floor area ratio. We want to lower the minimum height requirement, the minimum stories from 2 to 1. We want to remove the max building footprint, and we want to allow residential as a use on all floors, all stories 1 through 4. For Pod E, remove the floor area ratio again, completely change the min-max from 2 to 3, 2 min, 3 max, 2, 1 min, 4 max. So that's probably the biggest change from a story perspective. Remove the max building footprint as well, then allow residential on the first through the 4th floor. And just for general housekeeping purposes, we wanted to just allow retail office on the 2nd floor, just to make it uniform. So consistency findings, I mean, it's essentially a T&D. This is really what comp plans are meant to create. So it's a mixed-use community, serves the daily needs of the residents and really anybody around the area. It provides housing at an appropriate scale. You've got jobs nearby. You've got retail restaurants nearby. You've got a park nearby, which you'll see in the rendering. We're going to propose some improvements to that as well. So it really increases the quality of life in the area. We don't intend to alter the mix of uses necessarily. We want to keep the mix. It's just we want to change the ratio we're allowed to develop at. So we really want to make it where both uses can flourish. Right now it's just heavy commercial. By adding this residential, this PD will actually be able to balance itself, really function well. And again, the rendering, you'll get a better understanding of that. We also want to bolster the shared parking language contained in the original PD. Right now it says parking shall be shared, and we're going to maintain that. We actually performed a parking study with this application just to be sure with this proposed addition, even though it was an allowed use, we wanted to make sure the parking could handle it, and our study proved that it can. And then, we share the connectivity. It's an interconnected vehicle and pedestrian network. So that checks that box as well regarding the comp plan. And a similar approach to the land development code as well. It's a mixture of land uses, densities. The result is a sustainable development conserves energy. We're protecting all of our resources by having the shared parking, multiple transportation options. There's a bus route right out front, a nice bus shelter as well. So that's available. I'm sure the e-bikes and the scooters and golf carts that are probably coming this is a great development for that as well. Connections to nearby land uses, we're offering a lot of pedestrian connectivity through this development. Obviously a mix of uses. So all the boxes there are checked again. So this is a really great development. We're just going to make it better. PD amendment, this allows the flexibility to change to the changing needs of the economics. Really, this pertains to pods A and C. We don't necessarily have near-term development plans for pods A and C. We're proposing those changes to make sure we don't have to come back to you again if a redevelopment opportunity in those pods did come up. So that's really, we're hitting that box right there by saying, look, we're thinking ahead. This PD allows us to grow the next 10, 15 years. So here's the summary. We request to amend the Magnolia Park PD to be approved as follows. Remove the floor area ratio limits within pods A, C, D, and E. Remove the max building footprint limits within pods C, D, and E. Add residential as an allowed first floor use within pod C, D, and E. Add residential as an allowed use within pod A. Reduce the minimum stories to 1 within pod C, D, and E. Increase the maximum stories to 4 within pod C and E. And increase the maximum stories to 3 within pod A. And we feel we've demonstrated that the PD amendment is consistent with the city's LDC and comprehensive plan. And I just want to remind you, we're not asking for additional density or intensity. This is the same density intensity allowed in the original 1997 PD. So now the rendering. So you'll see, we've touched on these 4 buildings. They're pods of development. We're going to put a building on each pod right here. 4 stories. The application said up to 250 residential units. I don't think that's going to hit this. It's probably going to be closer to 200, 220. That's probably what you're seeing here. But splitting hairs a little bit at this point, but just for full disclosure. This is the 5th pod right here inside pod D, or the 5th envelope. I'm sorry, I call these pods. These are envelopes. The 5th envelope in pod D is for the clubhouse and amenity center, which is right across from One Love. So, there's a lot of synergy there. We also, it's actually an allowed by right use right now in the PD, but we're proposing to add parking to this undeveloped portion of pod C, and it's going to be covered parking. So that's just going to be an extra amenity to the PD. And then I alluded to some improvements to pod F. This is the current open field in One Love Cafe, or next to One Love Cafe. We are exploring options for improving it to make it more of a usable amenity rather than just a large open field. It's great as it is, but we think we can make it a little better. And before I close it, I want the project attorney, Ms. Patrice Boyes, to be able to present anything for the record if needed. Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. You know what? This time I apologize. To answer your question. So this is, and architect may be able to come up and express a little bit more than I can, but this is an accurate depiction of a elevation that we would be using on this site. So the PD standards actually, while there may be some ambiguity in them, we do know that when there's ambiguity, you do have to follow the underlying code. So that is our intent. Yeah. So just for clarity, page 15 and 17 of the redlined PD standards, which are actually table 3. Mm-hmm. If you find that, I don't know what actual page it is in your PDF, but you do see the redline standards. Mm-hmm. Where building characteristics, we get into midway through the page, starting on page 15, spills into 16, and then 17 as well, you'll see more building characteristics for the PD, and it's really for all the pods under a non-self-storage scenario. This PD was originally planned for some self-storage. That never happened. So we do offer some standards. And again, if there's ambiguity, we would be required to meet the city code as far as I recollect.
I think Ms. Sutton has a question from,
So I would just say, most of my questions came from the changes on page 17, because it just doesn't seem to address residential facades, residential glazing. I would hope in something like this that's mixed use and sort of a T&D like, that we would see standards more comparable to what the city has in transect zones, looking for active uses and doors to the units on the ground floor. I just looked it up, like for residential, for multifamily, a transect zone would require 30% on the first floor, 15% on upper floors. And still having some facade articulation or some kind of standards. I appreciate the pretty picture, but I need that in words. And this also, I'm not sure if there are like active entrances to the units, or if there's just a main, locked entrance like most multifamily buildings have. But we do sort of have different requirements in transect zones, and I would hope in this type of development our buildings would meet a similar standard.
Ms. Boyce. Yeah. Nope, go ahead.
Yeah, like I said, we intend, where there's not a clear-cut answer to the articulation connectivity, to follow the city's code. So things like building entrances and access, we tried to provide some clarity on that, and I apologize. Let me see if I can find it in here. So
for example, the section, it's towards the top of page 17 where it says, in the left column, long uninterrupted walls along pedestrian areas are discouraged in the following guidelines. Those two things only apply to non-residential facades. I would love if those applied to all facades. So it's asking for at least one building entrance every 100 feet. Building walls are designed to include architectural relief, a minimum of every 20 feet, to include setback variations, inset, planting, projecting planters, windows, pilasters, or bays, etc. I would love if that applied to all buildings. I don't know if that's a problem for your residential design. But it bothers me that, we could get long interrupted walls, or we could have these fairly decently large buildings with just one entrance. We have no guarantee as to how many entrances these are going to have. I'd love for them to be into units like we require in the transect zones, and not just, one into a common lobby. I imagine that's not how they're currently designed, and so it may be a change for you all, but it is something that the city's requiring in a lot of areas where we have multifamily housing.
Thank you. My name's Scott Weber. I'm the Director of Design at ACI Architects, and appreciate the questions. I really do. I wish we could just zoom in on these. I think you'd love them. Each one of the buildings has 3 entries to it. So there's 3 entries into a main space. And then when you do have private residences on the ground floor, all of them have doors that open to the exterior. Now, whether we choose to put a small balcony out there with a gate to that, you could actually walk out to the sidewalk. Okay, so that was the intent. I'm right there with you. We want movement in the facade. We want glazing on the facade. You can't rent a unit if there's not wonderful, beautiful glass and stuff in there. We're also picking up all the bricks, all the elements that we see around the commercial, try and tie the two together. But we were a little stuck with these commercial standards there, so we were trying to break away from that, but still be respectful of what's there. And not only that, the neighbors to the sides, because there's multifamily all around us. We want to be better, really. I wish you could zoom into the clubhouse too. But we'll have, when we reviewed the overall standards, we just said we don't have any problem with those. Going back to the LDC, we said we didn't have any objections, so we're planning on meeting all that.
Okay, for a transect zone though, would you have a problem if we added something that says you're going to comply with building form standards and design standards for the transect zones? Is that a problem?
I don't think we've analyzed it.
Okay.
is the issue, but I rose to say, in response to your concern, what he just said, my client is willing to agree to a permit condition that conforms the PD amendment to the criteria that we can, re-articulate for the record, and we can clean that up between now and City Commission.
I guess one of the problems, we're not approving a development plan right now.
Right.
And so, I guess, we could ask you to come back and let us approve the development plan, when you get ready to do that. And that would basically allow you to analyze what that is, particularly having listened to the plan board. And we could move by, I'm sorry, Ms. Sutton.
So I like that idea, Chair. I've actually had side conversations with staff about the fact that I think now that more development plans are going back to boards, it might make sense for PDs that the plan board has approved to come to us instead of the DRB, who won't be familiar with the conditions. And that things that need special use permits should also, like the development plan, should just come to us and not have to go to two
I know,
boards.
but-
And so I think in general, that's something, like, we're starting to see that here, staff. This is gonna come back as a major development plan. I know that that would be a code change, but, I am in support in general of something like this that has a PD or also special use permits coming back to us, because we're more familiar with those other criteria that can be checked at the development plan as well.
So, on behalf of my client, and for the record, I'm Patrice Boyes, I'm the land use attorney for the project. And I was the original land use attorney in 1996 and 97 when this was first permitted. So I have a lot of insight into how it came about, how revolutionary this project was for its time. It was the first project done under Congress for New Urbanism Standards guidelines. There was nothing in your code at that time. And it was so radical, it took 40 hours of public hearing before the City Commission to get it approved. It was so new. And I can tell you that over the 26-year life of a PD, you're going to have changes, and you have to think about the equity of requiring this applicant to zoom forward to our transect zone standards. That's a little tough to retrofit, but we're willing to do as much as we can as long as we're not delayed unnecessarily or held to standards that don't exist. So I think that I think it's perfectly appropriate to hold my client to what you're seeing on the screen in terms of the characteristics of that building, and we can certainly provide that to staff based on the representations we've made tonight. I'm a little uncomfortable with coming back with, I'm certainly happy to provide for information purposes the development plan to this board. We're not required to come back, and so that poses delay and therefore unexpected cost on my client. And it's not in your code that we come back. And I'm not trying to fight with you, I'm just trying to come to some compromise where, we serve the city's best interests, but we also honor my client's, rights to move through the process in a way that's predictable. So, I've been practicing 32 years. My word is my bond. And, we can certainly work with staff on conditions that we put into the PD. It'll take a little bit of time to draft that and have staff approve it on the way to City Commission. But it's approvable for your purposes here this evening. You can recommend approval subject to the applicant developing conditions that reflect the renderings. That protects you as well.
Keeping in mind, we can't even see the renderings.
I can't see the ground floor,
Yeah, we
and the
can't-
ground floor is what our code is.
I mean, I see that there's buildings there, but I can't see what they look like.
Yeah. Do we have any other renderings on anybody's?
When you look at our code, and particularly in transects, we've actually added like building material standards in the last couple of years as well. And the first floor has higher standards than the upper floors. And that's what I'm having the hardest time seeing here is the first floor.
Okay, I appreciate that, and we can talk to you about the materials to be used, and we can include that in, supplemental language in the PD amendment, we're not in a transect. We are not in a transect. I can repeat that 10 times. We can do our best, but we can't retrofit this 26-year-old PD to your current transect zones. And what I don't want is another 40 hours of public hearing. I was pregnant with my son, and at the end, I told the commission, if you continue one more time, we're going to be in the maternity ward. And now here we are 26 years later. His life has changed, the life of this PD has changed, and things are coming back around. So I hope you'll recommend approval and allow us to supplement the record in some condition that you fashioned tonight. Awesome.
Mr.
There we
Edelton,
go.
you had something to say? Mr. Person, what were you doing?
He was back in the tech room bringing us up
Oh,
the
okay.
renderings. He's working in the back today.
I saw the dark clothing, I thought it was the bailiff.
Mr. Edelton, did you?
And I thought I was going to say something and then not say something, and now I'm going to say something again. So yes, I think to your point that an option, of course, for you all is to ask for that condition that addresses your concerns. And I would say, from staff's perspective, and it sounds like also, of course, for the applicant here, the more specific we can point to in the code, like you have already talked about for our transect zones with, our materials requirements and things like that. I think that's going to be the most helpful. As far as, where it applies for the whole PD and things like that, I think, again, you have flexibility in the condition that you may make to say that, the residential buildings that have been shown or presented here tonight will conform to those conditions, or the transect zones, if you will, if that's what you all choose. So that was the first response to that. As far as the procedure that you were asking about, which board it can go to, I would have to verify this, of course, by going back into the code in more detail and reaching out to our legal also. But I actually think that the language in the code as is says appropriate board. So I think that there is already the opportunity for when and if future development meets these different thresholds that are required by code today, to go to a board, that staff has the ability to pick whether or not that would be the plan board or the DRB. But again, please let me confer with other staff before I give you 100 on that. But from what I see here for the thresholds and levels of development review, it says appropriate board, which generally means that's up to staff.
And can you just confirm, if they submit more than 100 units at one time, they will have to go to a board, us or the DRB?
It would have to meet
So that's
these
new.
thresholds.
Major development plans are just starting to come back. but
Right.
They're coming.
Right, but that's development plan, we're here on zoning tonight.
Yep.
So,
But we've put conditions on PDs before that they have to come to us rather than the development review board. So it's not unusual for us to do that.
yeah, we'll defer to the city attorney and staff on that determination.
And you wouldn't
Before-
have to go to both boards.
Just us instead of them.
It would just be one or the other.
Yeah, same answer, defer to the legal opinion of the city and staff's recommendation, et cetera. Before I forget, for housekeeping, I wanted to enter into the record applicant's exhibit list, exhibits 1 through 8. The only document you don't already have in the city file is our PowerPoint presentation, which is exhibit 4. And I just asked that those be moved into evidence. They consist of the application, the staff report, the PowerPoint staff did, our PowerPoint, the public participation report, the agenda item, the actual agenda of the city plan board, and the resume of our engineer. And Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Sutton, you have questions?
So I would just say, I'd love for this to be transect standards or something similar. I understand your concerns with the existing buildings. I think as a minimum, what I would like to see, and I don't know how other people feel, but as a minimum, if you all are willing to discuss or agree, or I'm willing to make a motion that this, and it's not really numbered, but the first row under the building characteristics for pods A, B, C, D, E, F, G, non-self-storage and I, this one where you've changed it from storefront to non-residential facades, where it talks about building walls and the architectural relief, and it talks about at least one building entrance every 100 feet. I'm okay with that as a minimum, but applying
You want that
to
in residential?
and non-residential, if that's amenable to you. That's less than a transect, but it's something. The other thing I would like to see is,
Can we hold one?
Yeah.
We have to make sure that works. Hold on just a second.
The only place I had a question about was the entries. We have 3 main entries, so one on either end, and then one towards the rear, which is 99% of the people parking there and coming into the building that way. Now, there is multiple entries at every unit, but that's not a public entry, or it's not a multiple entry, that's private entry. So how you define entry is, I'm a little curious. So over 2 or 3 facades, you have no problem, you'd be within 100 feet. But that one main facade, there isn't a public entry into that. 3 entries, 4 sides.
do all sides of the building have some kind of doors?
Absolutely, every unit
Okay,
every unit has
I
its own
think-
balcony, its own door.
I'm okay with rewording that so that some of them can be private entrances, but I like the every 100 feet.
Yes,
And I think that's lower than what we're holding people to in transects, where we require it for every unit with street frontage. So if we can finagle that language a little bit, but I like the idea of every 100 feet. If you feel like you have some kind of door, at least every 100 feet, it doesn't have to be a public door.
so, great, just to be clear, every unit has a balcony, every unit has a living room that will enter onto a sidewalk or towards a sidewalk. So I think we have you covered there.
Okay. And then my second suggestion is, and this is coming from the transect, and I'm open to what you all have, but I'd like to have some kind of glazing standards for the residential buildings, which this currently doesn't have any glazing standards. And in the transects, it's 30% for first floor multifamily, 15% for upper floors. If you would prefer a different number, you can suggest one to us, but I think we need to have one.
So the 15% of glass versus wall? Is that what you're saying?
So
this
it's between
percentage?
3 and 8 feet. I don't have that part, yeah. So it's measured like basically the middle section of the wall. It's not the whole wall. I don't have that part open in front of me. How glazing is calculated.
First floor, and on the floors of,
I mean, it's just
Where's
a de-
James when we need him, guys? Come on.
It's just a detail, it's a detailed calculation. I would have to go back and run these. I mean, we had to produce all of the facades already in order to even get the renderings. So-
Looking at these renderings, I think you're probably at 30% on the upper floors as well. I mean,
sorry,
The combined area of glass on all floors above the first divided by the total area of the building facade for those floors.
Well, I don't have my calculator.
Yeah.
But I-
Quick, and using this image.
I mean, we specialize in multifamily. We had a great hit rate on every city, in Florida, so I'm sure we're gonna be right where you need us to be, but, I'd have to run that calculation.
and that's great, but we're not approving this as a development plan. We're approving the zoning, and so if a different architect comes in, 10 years because the economy crashes, we aren't held to your
Understood.
buildings. So we have to watch out for that. So I'd like to have a glazing standard. Whatever that is, I think we need one for residential buildings.
We're fine with agreeing to a glazing standard. Can't pick a number tonight. Can we pop that number in subject to staff's recommendation between now and city commission?
I think if staff has an idea, no one else is speaking up on this, so.
Well, no,
I've sort of said what I have thought. I'm willing to let staff work it out. If we get to,
Okay.
25% on the ground floor and 20% whatever it is. I trust staff to
Right.
sort of get that intent across. But I think that a glazing standard is important here.
Condition number 2 can be, you know, there will be a glazing standard number TBD.
And maybe just as a starting point, I can say that staff, of course, will peg our sort of recommendations and what we're working with to the Transect zone standards as they are today.
And we'll see if it works, no issue. We can't do the math here in real time. Any other concerns?
Anybody else? Dominating the meeting today.
It's all right, that's fine.
Mr. Hill?
Yeah, I was hoping you could speak a little bit to the required pedestrian connectivity that would be required by the PD, particularly internal, because I'm curious how that, just by the pretty picture up there, how that northwest building, how people can easily walk to, say, the Starbucks that's on the southeast side of that without crossing a sea of parking.
Sure. So currently, there is a pedestrian path that meanders through here that connects this apartment complex and all the ones up north into the PD without having to have a long distance along the public right-of-way in this way. So we plan on maintaining that. In fact, you can see it right here. You can see the intent to maintain that around this unit right here, this building. And then also, our driveway is going to align with the driveway of the apartment across the 41st, which 41st right here is a private road. So we're going to line our entrances. We're going to provide pedestrian connectivity from 51st along 41st. We're going to build a new sidewalk. We're going to allow people to enter. We're also going to have a connection to 51st right here for pedestrians. We are going to have a connection right here for pedestrians with a sidewalk connection. And vehicular connections will be right here and right here where I mentioned before. So that's the general intent of how people are going to get to the retail center. This is actually going to increase their connectivity. You'll have more options. And, if people aren't comfortable down here by the swamp, which that's currently where they're going, you'll have the option to go through the actual developed portion of the property.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I have a question on the issue of, first of all, in general, I don't have any problem with any of this. I think the design standards are important. It's clear that this was intended to have far more residents than it does today. And I honestly think that will make it a much more viable development, so I don't have any problem with that. It's the policy of the city to increase density closer in, and that would certainly do that here. And I think you're in favor of increasing the density. I appreciate you concentrating it in one place. I have one issue with the idea that we're going to now reduce the minimum stories from 2 to 1, because that's kind of going the opposite direction of increasing density. It seems like that's counterintuitive right now, and I'm generally not in favor of that.
Just thinking on the fly, there's no other reason that we lowered that other than just for completeness and to give the utmost amount of flexibility to future redevelopment or to the proposed development.
Well, and we're I mean, to some extent, when we work on this stuff, we're working on, at the point that y'all are not here anymore, this is all going to still be here on the ground. And so, I think the important thing is that the basic form of this continue to be a multi-use and work play kind of a place, and I just don't think that, I understand the flexibility you might want, but I think that's a flexibility I'm not willing to give, because that flies in the face of maximizing density and doing what it is we're trying to accomplish here.
The only request I would have is our clubhouse is currently proposed as 1 story. And I would like the flexibility of keeping those types of facilities as a 1 story, but if we propose a residential, I'm sorry, and we do have parking, I'm sorry, it's off the screen, but any sort of parking structure. We just want to be sure one story, because technically this is a structure. I think our PD language tried to clarify structures need to have walls, so I think we got that covered, but we removed that little bit of protection. But in general, if we do agree, except we would like provisions for having clubhouses as a one-story structure.
Commissioner, we can clean this up for you. The one-story limitation would not apply to residential buildings, but obviously it would not rule out the parking and the clubhouse amenity. So condition 3, we can clean that up.
Ms. Sutton?
It does kind of look like that clubhouse might have like some dormers or something. Like, would you be open to maybe a height minimum? Like because it's probably going to have, it's probably going to be maybe a 1.5-story building height, even though maybe functionally it's only one floor of use in there. Do you have any flexibility in that? Or maybe the office or something is a loft or...
Well, you've interpreted it correctly. We see it as a tall one-story.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're responding to the cafe as well. And we didn't want to put a 2-story building there, not be able to see the beautiful area behind it. So it didn't make sense to, even to this type of development, to put a 2-story, you're asking for an elevator, 2 stairs, it just makes it totally impractical. So for a clubhouse, we wanted to say, okay, this is almost like a home, a big stately home. And we thought it would fit in beautiful with the park right there. Just 2-story just didn't make sense to it. But it is, you're right, we think of it as a tall 1-story. So you can walk in, you have this beautiful vaulted volume, you'll have light coming in through the clerestories, and a game room and everything. You don't want a 9-foot ceiling. So we're going to hopefully have 12-foot clear, 13-foot clear, and then vaulted in the center.
So I guess my question is, if we changed it from stories to a height, what would you be comfortable with?
Are you asking for a clear interior space or
A roof
the
height.
roof height? Oh boy, we have it drawn on an elevator. I just don't have that memorized what that is. We're even having a steep pitch roof to get the height up there.
Because I don't know if that would
Yeah,
meet
no,
what your concern is. If I hear you, but I also am willing to work with the clubhouse if we can settle on a minimum of 18 feet or 20 feet, whatever it is, something that's more comparable to a typical 2-story building, but because you have the pitched roof and you have the, maybe this building meets that, it's a 1-story building that meets that height requirement. Is that a way that we can sort of work around it?
We can certainly do to the top of roof. That's not a problem. I think there's some flexibility that we'd like inside. For instance, you wouldn't want to walk into your office and have an 18-foot high volume inside your office. So we want to be able to have smaller spaces and larger spaces within that volume. To the top of roof.
Yeah. I think we're more concerned about the look from the outside. The roof height is what we're concerned about.
To the top of roof, that's what we're asking.
Because we don't do building permits. I mean, we don't know where your ceiling's going to be in there.
Right.
So, yeah, we're concerned about what it looks like from the outside and just having a substantive structure. And then in the future, 10 years from now, when someone's coming in, they think really they should probably do 2 stories because they've got to meet this minimum height requirement,
Sure,
right?
let's do a minimum height to the top of roof. That would be great.
Okay, and do you have an idea of what you'd be comfortable with?
I wish I had it mathematically in front of me, the drawings in front of me, what that was. I mean, we can get back to you.
We can provide the drawing to staff.
Okay.
That's a minimum. It's a minimum.
I'm hearing 20 as a starting number until we get the drawing.
How about if we say 20, and you can negotiate with staff within some kind of limit?
Reasonable limit, yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine.
Any other questions for Ms. Boyes or Mr. Stovall? You're lucky I remember my own name.
Seriously.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing none, we'll open it to the public hearing. Is there anybody in the public that is here today that would like to comment on this petition? And we'll take note of the comments from the Healthcare Federal Credit Union, which they've sent a letter to us. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for comments or a motion.
Okay.
Ms. Sutton,
I'll go ahead and make a motion. I think I captured everything we were sort of talking about. So I'll make a motion to approve LD 23-35, the Magnolia Park Plan Development, based on the backup and the evidence presented here today, with a few suggested items for staff to work on before it goes to the commission. One of those is the residential building facade standards. We would like to see something comparable to the non-residential facade standards that are in the PD. We just are looking for something comparable that would apply. Not all of those doors need to be public, but we do want doors or some kind of entrance every 100 feet as a minimum. We'd like to see a residential glazing standard on that, probably starting with the requirement from the transect zones and being, somewhat flexible, because the PD actually requires more the bigger the building is, and I think we can stick to a straight number for the multifamily buildings. We would like to have a minimum height for buildings, so rather than having the minimum two-story requirement or allowing going down to 1 story, having a minimum height of buildings of something around 20 feet, and we'll let you work with the applicant on that. And then lastly, a condition that any major development plans that are within the PD limits, so likely this multifamily, would come to the plan board for approval rather than the DRB.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for one clarification on the minimum height for buildings, just to for the avoidance of doubt. That does not apply to the covered parking structure.
Yes, not applying to the covered parking structure, so you can do except for covered parking.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
we have a somewhat convoluted motion, but I think it's clear enough.
And if I could just restate the last part, just for the sake of the
Have at it.
record and clarity, for development plans that should come in the future, should they cross the appropriate threshold for a board review, that this board would like to be the one that reviewed them.
Mm-hmm. We had a similar condition on the courthouse PD.
Yes.
We have a motion to approve with conditions. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Hill. Any comments from anybody? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you so much. It was less than 40 hours.
We
We're
used
not
to
as
have an
scary as we
architect on the
seem.
board for these comments. Now you have an engineer making architectural comments, so I apologize.
We'll get you back, don't worry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's gonna be beautiful.
That's the end of our agenda today because we met 2 weeks ago. Is there any board comment? Mr. Nay?
Oh, yeah, happy birthday to you. Happy
Birthday to you.
Happy birthday,
dear
Juan.
Happy birthday to you. That, by the way, is the first time the plan board has ever sung.
We need to sing more often. That was fun. Yeah.
Any other comments, member comments?
Let the record show Bob has a beautiful voice.
No one's ever said that either.
There's a first time for everything, guys.
Mr. Edelton, do you have anything?
I do not.
All right.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Yes.
Is there any update? I think there were 2 potential dates for a city commission meeting. Is there any update on that?
August 15th is the date that was.
It's going to be the August 15th. The other option was like August 8th or something.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Could you announce that again? I missed that too.
August 15 is the date that was given by the
Okay.
commission for a joint meeting between the city plan board and the commission.
Okay.
Would you mind just sending us an email with the date, time, and location? I assume it's here, but we've done it at like GRU admin in the past sometimes. And also, I think, if I remember right, it was like 5 o'clock, so it was sort of an unusual time. If you can just confirm it via email for
Will
us,
do.
that would be great.
Okay.
Can you make it a calendar invite? That'd be so helpful. It really would, though. It's
I
how-
declare
It
this
would.
meeting adjourned.